Men are the prize, the podcast. It's Harvey, your host. How are you? I hope life is treating you well. I hope 2023 is treating you well. As I record this, we're early in the year. So, we're just getting into 2023 and I hope you came out swinging and I hope everything is doing well for you. Um this podcast, if you're hopefully you've been listening or watching for a while, this is a space for men to be open. This is an emotional, safe space. And we can talk about anything as men, our happiness, our sadness, our depression, whatever we're going through, how we came out of it, how we're still trying to get out of our troubles. And inevitably, if we're going to talk about emotion, we have to get to the some of the sad stuff, some of the things that can really take us down. So this week, we're going to talk about grief, and we're going to talk with somebody who helps men deal with their grief, which is somebody I respect, to go into it, to spend time talking to men about something that's probably even hard to talk about yourself. So my guest this week is Tony Lynch. How are you? How you doing today, sir?
I am doing awesome, brother. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm glad that you are here. Real quick, we get right to the point. The bio. Tony Lynch is the founder of the nonprofit Memories of Us, grief support for men, where they're dedicated to meeting men where they are in their grief journey. That's
Yes.
it. Not much more needs to be said. So, the first thing I'm going to ask, and I've been asking this lately because I like a good bio.
Mhm.
I like reading back to people what they're known for or what they do or how they describe themselves to other people. When you hear your bio read back to you, what feeling resonates? What do you think of? What do you feel when you hear that about you?
A sense of honor because it's me, right? And what I wish someone would have did for me when I experienced my grief, you know, in the beginning stages and throughout. So yeah, when I hear that, it makes me smile because that's exactly what we do. We're dedicated to meeting men where they are, wherever they are in their grief journey.
That's excellent. And we'll talk about that because I think what you just said, I think people don't understand that grief is a journey.
Hmm.
I think people just think, I just feel bad. And
Right.
that's it. And that there aren't levels to it, that there aren't stages to it, that you don't start here and get here. Excuse me, that there's not a process to it. So I hope you can. In fact, if you wouldn't mind, can you give us a little bit of expertise? Tell me about grief, the things that people probably wouldn't expect or even understand about it. What can you tell us about the item?
It's the way it look and the differences between men and women.
Okay.
So since women are have a lot more estrogen than men, they become more emotional. So that's one fact. And then on the other side, you have the men who produce more testosterone. That's a huge factor. So the way that we experience grief, since we are prone to the masculine energy, we become more aggressive in certain ways. So, say for instance, the strongest thing that I've seen between the men was the way that we reacted to the loss. We either dove into work or we became isolated. We didn't know how to talk to anyone. In a lot of ways, we became very irritable. We began making very bad decisions, right? That led to, in my case, homelessness. Those bad decisions led me there. Um, and then the depression set in because I didn't understand that. It became a battle between myself, right? And I became aggressive in that nature because I wanted to fix it, but there's no way to fix it. So if I can't fix it, I'm going to break it, which in turn led to my planning my suicide. So, and that's why I try to explain to women what you're seeing is a man going through something hard right now. This is you have to see the patterns and understand. You have to add in all of these different things as well. How do you perceive this person? Because that person is looking at you with the same perception. So as men, we're not taught to express ourselves. We're taught to suppress. And so, yeah, it's a strong similarity across the board. But having men actually get outside of their head and look at that, and then saying, oh wow, I never realized, I didn't understand that. That's what we mean. Going back and understanding and standing there with them.
Okay. All right. So if you have watched or listened to this podcast, you know what it's called. It's called Men of the Prize. I
Mm-hmm.
take the word prize, and four of those letters represent characteristics that I think are good for men. I think for this, I'm going to tweak it a little bit and I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to still use the same words, but more in relation to how you deal with men in this situation. So the first letter in the word prize is P and the word is purpose. Purpose is defined as reason for which something is done or created or which something exists. So when you get a man who is dealing with grief,
Mm-hmm.
what is your purpose for him,
My
to him?
purpose is when a man come into or invites me into their space, my purpose in that moment is to become the best visitor in that space with that man. And what I mean by that, I don't want to add any extra burden to them because, for one, they've invited me in, and I've always wanted to honor that. And secondly, they invited me in to speak. So I have no place in there. So my job is to be the best visitor. And that's what we call holding space with that individual. I have to be the best visitor I possibly can. So instead of you getting up and trying to get me water, trying to comfort me, my job is to be there to comfort you so you don't have to think outside of what you're going through. Right. And so therefore, when men are sitting around each other and that element is taken away, the man can then focus on what he's feeling because there's a sense of this man is here for me, right? I don't have to do anything. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, so let's just say you've been invited to a man's home. I would imagine it's not the same situation for every man. I guess maybe is it you come to one home and are men, it's a better question. How accepting are men, even though they invited you in? This is an incredibly emotional moment. It's profound. They're going through all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things. Excuse me. What's it like to go into a home, go into a space for a man who's going through something, who might still be kind of resistant to the idea of somebody being there with him? What do you have tactics or anything specific that you do to allow or to help this man be more comfortable with you? What do you do to make that guy feel better about you being there?
Well, when you show up to a person's place, it's a matter of respect. So I always come in and I respect that individual. But I'm also observing to see what they're doing. I'm checking out their environment to see if they've been drinking or anything like that. So those things do come into play, so it helps my approach to be more open-minded. So the first thing I do is come in, introduce myself. They sort of look at me because we as men, it's a vulnerable space, right?
Mhm.
So very reluctant, even though you invited me in, doesn't mean anything. It's just
Right.
get the first step out the way. That's it.
Mhm. Right.
And I come in and say, hey, how are you doing? Oftentimes they'll come back and say, oh, I'm okay. How are you doing? I change my approach. I'm a little bit, it's hard, but it's soft. How are you doing? And then when you say that to a man in a space like that, they can look you in your eyes and go, okay, this man really wants to know how I'm doing.
Mhm.
So they feel they begin to open up. They begin to feel comfortable. And then after that, hey, have a seat. And then from there, I eliminate all the rest of the distractions that you may have. So their family may be asleep, or they may just be sitting in the house by themselves. Sometimes it's a fishing spot. Sometimes it's a spot where they go camping at. So it's always the environment that they feel comfortable in. You never
Okay.
want to ask anyone to come outside of their comfort zone, especially
Understood.
in situations like that, because it can cause triggers and things like that. So always, that's the first thing. Make sure that person that you're going to sit with is in a comfortable zone, because that's going to allow the conversation.
Okay. Now, you mentioned at the beginning that you kind of are what you needed when you were going through your emotional stage and struggles.
Right. Yes.
So, if you can kind of think back as much as you're willing to, how do you think you would have responded to somebody coming to you the way you come to men now? What would that first connection would have been if somebody came through and was like, "How you doing, Tony?"
It would have been received, but in the same sense, you got to remember when you're going through those emotions as men, you the first time someone approaches you is to become defensive until you state your purpose. Why are you here? What do you want? Right? Because I don't know what your intentions are towards me. And that's the way that I would have received it. But now looking back at it, I do those things and it would have been well received, right? Even though if that person would have been patient with me to get past, the facade of the masculine energy, you know, if that person would have stayed with me as I walked through that, the conversation would have happened. Because now we're in a space where I can relate to you, right? Every man, most human beings on this place, when you're going through something, you want to be surrounded by people that understand what you're going through. So, and that's a huge thing, because when I lost my son, being a single Black male and going to church and all of these things, when I lost my son, my first instinct was, what are people going to think about me? Right? But then there was a side of me, the fighter side of me, that told life, no, you're not going to break me. You're not going to do this to me. I'm going to show you how strong I am. So it became a show of, see, I told you, you can't, no matter what you do to me. That's that mentality. And in the same sense, you go to connect to these places because you're looking for someone to connect with you. You're looking for someone to see you and what you're going through. So yes, I would have received it if the right people would have came along. But the problem was not all the people that came along was the right people, which in turn turned me into the hermit. I isolated myself because I refused to be counseled. Especially if you don't know, if you don't have the experience. So that's a huge thing.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that I don't know about a skill or just something you would have to master or become very good at is being patient when you're
Yes.
talking to a lot of men. Talk about that. How is that? I mean, is that something you had going into it? Is that something you built? Is that something that came about with dealing with more and more men? How is patience an important part of what you do?
The huge part was having patience with myself. And then from there, it grew, because you can't speak something and not understand it, right? So that was the first thing. Once I realized where I was mentally, was having patience with myself as I go through this process. I didn't want to rush anything. And so life slowed down for me. And I began to connect all of these different things. And I went, wow, there's something to this, right? So, and that began my approach, or helped me start to develop that approach when I had other men or been invited to their spaces as well. Because being a man myself, it's hard to have patience with yourself. You want everything like that. You want everything to be okay, just like that, within a matter of days or weeks or months. You don't want to think about the first year, right? Because you're already anticipating the pain. So once you start anticipating the pain, you begin to, I don't want to go that route because that's going to suck. So if I can do it now, I don't have to deal with that later. Having patience with the process of beginning of your starting to heal. So patience is huge. Patience with other people is huge. Can you imagine going into a room and someone has a stack of papers right here, but this is the process that they want you to go through. You don't know what's in there, right? And it's all directives. Maybe very few little tools because they're trying to push you in and out. And people, when you're rushed like that, you come out the other side. Sometimes it backfires on you. It can backfire on you because even though you have this knowledge, it's useless because it went by so fast. So as you're going through the process, having patience with the journey, allowing yourself to feel, and being vulnerable enough to express yourself, not to hold it in. Because if you rush that, 9 times out of 10, it's going to come back on you. It manifests itself in a different way. And it's just a reminder that, hey, you skipped something. So just like anything you do in life, there's steps. There's definite steps.
Okay. I applaud you for this, for doing this, for making this, I guess, your life's work, because it clearly requires, I don't know how to say it, a certain level, not even confidence, of recognition of what you're stepping into every time you walk into a man's room, into a man's heart, into a man's struggle. To just go in there and you're talking to a man and you're about to hear something that's probably not happy. I'm sure it isn't. That's a question. So you're going to a lot of men, and obviously there's a specific reason you're going to see these men.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to separate yourself from their situation?
Yes.
Because so, and explain how you do that, because you pretty much know what you're getting into with every man. Something happened and he's here. And to a degree, you need to hear him. You want him to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting it back. So how do you go, hear that, take it in, and then maintain your sanity as you go about life?
Well, after the call and I'm on my way to the place, I asked to be emptied out because you can't fill in a full cup, right? So I want to be empty so I can receive what they're giving to me. My job, my goal at that moment is to take that away from them and take it away so they don't have to deal with it. They can go to sleep that night. So I detach myself emotionally because I'm reminded it's not about me. They're not calling for my story. They're calling because I'm offering support in that area. So as soon as the biggest mistake most some practitioners make in the beginning is that we are quick to say I. And I realized that that word right there can push a man away, because now you've just invalidated. You've made this about you, not about them, about you. And so then it becomes a place where you're starting to trade war stories with each other. Well, I've done this and I've done that. So I'm always reminded that it's not about me. It's not about me. You know, and so that keeps me from directing conversations or giving bad advice or bad suggestions, because then it becomes more personable on that end. And I've never wanted to take that away from another individual. This is not about me.
That's a skill right there. I will say that. And I would say that to anybody, psychologist, psychiatrist, who inevitably, when you talk to somebody and have profound conversations, you're going to hear deep, deep things, sometimes deep, dark secrets, sometimes things that are not really palatable. But to be able to hear it, to take it in, to advise, to help, but then when you're done, to be able to let it go,
Mm-hmm.
that's, to me, that is, I don't know if that's something that I'd be able to do, but to anybody who does it now, I applaud you. So, and it's obviously something that's really necessary, especially for us men, because it's like you said, there's no class on being a man and being emotional. It's
Right.
not expected. It's not regular. It's almost abnormal. So forget grief. Just like on a regular Tuesday, I'm not
Right.
emotional. So to then put me in a situation where I'm just kind of sitting in my emotion,
Mm-hmm.
in there, and I'm fighting it. I'm just, I can imagine I'm just in the river and the waves are crashing. And if I were to
Yes.
calm down, I'd be in a better space. But I'm fighting it because I don't want to talk about it. I don't know you. I don't want to say this, whatever. It feels like it's this physical battle, but an internal one too.
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud what you do. I want to get to maybe how, a little bit more into how you got here. The next letter in the word prize is R. The word is resilience. You kind of mentioned your son
Mm-hmm.
and how you lost him. Resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. Can you talk about how the things that happened, the loss of your son, homelessness, how these things hit you, how you able to come get past them to end up helping people who are in a situation that you know all too well? How did you get there?
was a long road. It was hard, most definitely, because you have to take in those elements of being homeless, just losing everything, lost my family, my son, my mom, father, son, my younger brother. All of these different things played a factor into who I am now. But my son opened up the door when he passed away, because that is hard. That is by far the worst thing that a parent can ever go through. But there's no rules that saying that we're exempt from it. So that was the first thing. Once I began on that journey, was understanding that. So I couldn't take life personal. I couldn't take it personal. But now, with that being said, there was a side of me, the combative side of me, that wanted to fight life back. Like, I'll show you. I'll show you. No matter what you throw, no, I'll show you. Why would you do this to me? So I became that combative side, that side right there. So, it's a consistent battle. Eventually, I began to understand. I began to understand as I went through the process. As as I tell people, it was more of being in a dark well, right? And I'm down on the bottom, and I can see the light at the top. And I love using this analogy because it breaks it down. So as I'm down there, as a man, there's no way out. The walls are smooth. It's just not. I can't climb out. And so I am asking for someone to come and rescue me, right? But I don't know who. So eventually, over a period of time of being depressed and going through life, pretty much in a daze, I was searching. That's how those bad decisions came, because I'm looking for someone to save me, right? So coming back from there, asking the right questions. What is this? Why do I feel this way? Because no one's ever taught me about the emotional side of it. Why do I feel this way? And then eventually, it was like someone kept kicking dirt over top of me, and I was ready to go in the same sense. So the more the dirt came down, the wanted to stand there and just let them bury me alive. And then it was like someone dropped the rope down, and every time I went to go grab the rope, I had to jump out of the dirt, but all of these lessons came along with it, and it became a platform. Somebody kept moving the rope up even more. So once I got to the top, it made sense to me. It definitely made sense to me. I had to go through these things in order to help the next person. And it was the sense of, I have no one. So those who have gone before me, I want to make them proud of me if they're looking down over top of me, and understand that I come in with a forgiveful heart. And the only thing I ask is for the same in return to those who have gone, because we've all come from somewhere, right? And it's a battle. And as men, that's what we do. We have to be battle tested. Now I understand that. First, I thought life had a grudge on me. I was like, what did I do to you? But then I have to realize, everything that I've ever experienced was never about me. It was the experience and learning to grow through it and understand it, and being able to articulate it to the next person in a sense of compassion. And that's what kept me going, was the simple fact of, I knew what I was supposed to do, right? So it was the mixture of the physical battle, the mental battle, the emotional battle, and the spiritual battle for me. On one sense, I want to go back to what I know, which is the valid side of me. Well, that's not beneficial right now, because who am I going to find? The emotional side of me was surrendering to it and allowing myself to cry, allowing myself to sit with my grief and things like that. The physical side of it, well, I have to be better in order to fulfill this thing that I'm called to do. And then the mental side of it, well, I have to understand where's this depression coming from? Where's this anxiety coming from? Where all of these things coming from? So I had to start the healing process in those general areas. And it was the stepping stones to who I've become in this field now.
You said something before that that hit me, and you said that you can't take life personal.
No.
And that's really interesting. I heard that, and I'm like, because I mean, because we're men, a lot of our words are aggressive. It's this battle. I'm fighting, all these things, but then you can't take life personal because to a degree you have to be like, and you said it, like, why did you do this to me? Why would you take my child from me? Why would you take a parent from me? That sounds like the really and most important thing, at least for me, I think it would be to be like, I have to recognize that this wasn't done to me.
Right.
Like it happened, but it wasn't like there's some deity or some person who's like, listen, I'm gonna have this happen. This I'm doing to Harvey personally. And
Right.
I feel like that's got to be a good part of it. If you sit there and recognize that this happens to everybody and that everybody is gonna feel some loss, is gonna have this struggle, that must be a good part of it. It's not you, because eventually it's going to be all of us.
Right.
So to me, that's a big thing. Can't take life personal. You got to understand this is going, it's terrible for everyone, but it's not just you. I don't know. I just felt that. That hit me there. Um, how long did it take you to not take life personal? Can you, in terms of for you, when did you finally, was it in terms of you talking about the well? Do you remember, is there a moment for you where you were like, you know what? I know this hurt, this was terrible, but this was not, and you said it, it's not really about me. And it's good to say it now. But how long did you take before you were really like, you know what? Dane, this didn't happen to Tony. How long did that take for you?
When you're going through it, it feels like a lifetime, right?
Mhm.
But it was, let's see, probably in the course of maybe 3 years. And, you know, because there was a lot of things that people said to me that I did take personally. People were comparing their loss of an animal, their pet, to the loss of my child,
Oh God.
right? But it's not personal.
Right.
And what I mean by that, in the beginning, when it first, how are you going to compare that, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah, to me, and people were saying some crazy, well, what I thought in my mind was crazy stuff, right? But then there was a side that said, open up your eyes and listen, meaning stop talking, look at the person in front of you and listen to what they're saying. It's not personal. So I wanted to understand that. And I said, well, how is it not personal? Well, they're trying to relate to you the best way that they know how. So instead of taking it personal, how about you have a little bit of understanding? They're not they're not doing it to be malicious towards you. They're doing it because this is the only way they know how to relate. Look around you. How many people, how many men do you know that are standing here right now that have lost their child? Not very many, right? So it's not personal. And so within a matter of the first 3 years after my son passed away, and then when I got hit with my mother shortly after my son, it was a combination of all of those things, the previous lessons that I was taught when I was a kid that came back, and wanting to um, wanting to understand. So I didn't take this life personally. Then I began to read, and then I realized that this what I've gone through has been going on since the beginning of time. It's not personal. It's just part of life. Unfortunately, these bad things do happen. But what are you going to do in those moments when those bad things happen? If you take it personal, you'll have a reaction. If you begin to accept life on the level that it is, it becomes beautiful and you begin to respond. So I never wanted to react to anyone. I always wanted to be able to respond and go, thank you.
That's good. I mean, as I hear you talking about it, and my response was it was like the same response when you first heard it. If I lost my child and somebody's like, "Oh my God, oh, a few years ago I lost my dog Fluffy," I'm like, "What? What are you
Yeah.
talking about?" I know that would be my response. I know that, and that was visceral when you said it to me. But what I after hearing you and kind of just letting that roll around, what I find is that it seems like you pick up another emotion. You have to show empathy for somebody because they're trying to relate. And to be fair, even though I'm not an animal person, I'm not a big pet person, anything like that. But to somebody, we don't know how that affected them.
Right.
And that's the thing. Somebody lost that dog. I don't know how long that person had that pet. I don't know
Mhm.
what that pet meant to that person. Grief or loss is different for everybody.
Mhm.
So, and in that moment when it happened, what happened to you was like the worst thing that could happen in the world. So, like, I don't want to hear you tell me about yours because mine is the worst thing, right?
Right.
So, like, so I don't want to hear about you had a dog, whatever. I brought this child into this world. These are not the same. I think it requires so much. It's somewhat of a learning experience because I'm going to sit here and I'm all in my feelings and I'm lost, whatever. And somebody says something to me, and I have to recognize that that person went through something just like I did. And it
Mhm.
may not be their child, but it is somebody that was important to them too.
Exactly.
So to be able to grieve, but to be empathetic by somebody else's grief, that's an important skill. I That's interesting. I gotta say, through hearing all this, so much is rattling around in my head. And the one thing that comes to me before I continue is that inevitably somebody is gonna have this same feeling about me eventually.
Yes.
Because that's what it is, because it's life. When I lose somebody, somebody's eventually gonna lose me.
Mhm.
And if you think about it that way, then I'm like, I don't know how I'd feel because now I'd be like, oh my God, I can't imagine because this is a bit of a stretch. But we've had obviously suicide happens a lot, especially with us men. And there's a lot of people who say that suicide is a selfish act
Right.
because we are throwing grief upon people.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I don't know. I'm just talking this out, but I just find it interesting that I feel grief, but it begats grief. Grief begats it because it's gonna happen.
Right.
Somebody died, I'm gonna die, and that person's gonna die. And how we handle it is a major part of how we just stay sane.
Exactly. But it takes a
So,
while.
oh, I'm sure it does.
It
And for
takes
every,
time.
yeah, yeah, it takes
Takes
time.
time to understand, to get out of your masculine way, and to be open and understanding that you are a human being. You know, I've talked to a lot of people in the church and a lot of men in the church, and I have to ask them because they still, they still want to be men as well, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
I asked them, I said, well, what makes you different from Jesus? If I'm not mistaken, Jesus wept too. He grieved. What makes you any different from God? So it's a humbling experience because it forces them to go, I'm not better. I am, I am a servant. I am his child. So if he can do it, and that's where it comes in. If he can do it, I know I can do it. So it begins to creak open that door. And they begin to peek their head in, and that's when they can step into their new masculine self, equipped with all the things that they've been neglected their whole entire lives. And there's birth a new man.
Earth, a new man. That is interesting. That's interesting. You lose somebody, but then you gain a new self.
Yes, you gain a new identity because the world no longer looks the way it did before. Because in the beginning, you have hopes and dreams, you have ideas and a vision for this person that you're with, whether it be a spouse or child or parent, and because they have the same things for us, right? And so once that's stripped away, it's as if the world lied to you. Think
Mm.
about it. It's as if the world lied to you. You said that I was, no, the world didn't say that. This life didn't say that to you. You built that into your head. And now that is not there, you're disappointed.
Mm.
You're disappointed because you're going, I thought. You made it personal. It wasn't supposed to be this way. You've made it personal. Who are you blaming? This life isn't personal. You can't take this life personal.
So true.
You
And
spend
what's
more
interesting,
time fighting people.
yeah. What's interesting is that you're disappointed, but it's not. I mean, we don't think about it,
Right.
but we know it's going to happen. It is death is a part of life. So disappointment or feeling like you're being lied to, when in essence, it's not a lie. There's very few things that are more true than the fact that death eventually comes for us all.
Right.
So like nobody's lying to you at all. I mean, it's blatant, like, death and taxes, comments like that.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody's gonna die. You're gonna die. So when life changes, and I think in a lot of cases, is there a difference with dealing with men when a loss happens suddenly as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a death where you saw it happening and you knew it was happening? Maybe somebody had a, cancer and eventually they just weakened. So you knew they were going to die as opposed to something
Mm-hmm.
just how do you, is there a different way to handle men dealing with those two situations?
Yeah. Well, anticipatory grief is when you know this person is going to pass away. They have a illness that's going to take them.
Right.
So you can kind of brace yourself a little bit so the impact, isn't so blunt. Now, when, say for instance, you're at work, you get a call from the police, and one of your family members just got hit by a car. And you had just talked to this individual, you've made plans to have dinner tonight or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that initial shock. No, it wasn't supposed to be that way. We were supposed to go to dinner tonight. We were supposed to do all of these different things. So when you know the things that are happening, you can already begin to prepare the next steps. Yes, you're going to grieve. It's not going to be as bad as the sudden impact. So on a sudden impact, you're more susceptible to become angry. That's your first reaction. You're more, and that's the mentality of the men. We're more susceptible to become angry. But we have to be careful of who we're around, because now we're around other family members, we push that to the side, and we have to become the protectors, the comforters in the family, because now everyone's looking up to you. So you have to add those factors in. So depending on the situation, you have to adjust your approach.
All right. We'll skip the I in prize, is what I typically do. We're going to go to the next letter, which is Z, and the word is zeal. Zeal is defined as enthusiastic devotion.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to men about this is a different situation, obviously, with this conversation. I talk to men about what is it that you have for you that you do when life hits you hard? What is your solace? What do you do? Do you golf? Do you play tennis? Do you play an instrument? What is it that you do? So is one of the parts of helping men dealing with this grief kind of allowing them or helping them to find something, not take their mind off of this, but to deal with life by doing something else for the time being? Is that part of it at all, to say, you know what, I know you like doing this or something? Is giving a man or trying to help a man find joy somewhere else something that you do? Is that part of what you guys do?
It's not really finding joy somewhere else,
Mhm.
but it's tying what you're going through and sharing that moment with the person that you've left, that has left you. So what I tell men, because it's all about the memories that you shared, right? So when you're in that moment and things like that, you tend to talk about the things that you've done. So whether it's fishing, working out, and things like that, I am that grief buddy. So that's why I said, when I go and meet men, hey, where would you like to meet? Would you want to go to your house? I know you're in a moment right now. Would you like to go? Is there something that you would like to do? They would either go, you know what, it's a nice night out of the night. It's quiet. You want to go fishing? Right now I'm feeling kind of anxious and things like that. The gym always calmed me down. Would you like to meet me at the gym and have a workout with me? Right now, I just want to, I want to draw, I want to paint. So we find a place where we can go be creative at. So it's taking that negative energy and giving them an outlet to put it out somewhere else. In the sense of, because working out for me calms me down. It gets me in a state of where I can talk. So I would like to meet a man at the gym. Okay. Because we can connect through the steel, through the working out. But I also am a creative individual. So I don't mind going and sitting down and doing pottery or painting pictures and things like that, because it's going to take you to a moment to where you were happy, where everything made sense. Even if it is just for a brief moment, you can forget all of those things. And by the time you get done, you've done something. Okay. Instead of being destructive. I mean, I've gone out and shot guns with people, just because they needed to go and release. Okay, let's take the guns out. Let's go to the range. Let's go shoot something. And when they're done, it's not as if they're, because I watch them too, it's not as if they're taking me out there to kill themselves. Right. It's just the way that they need to express themselves right now. So, yeah, you have to be open with that.
Okay. Last letter in the word prize is E, and the word is expectation. A strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. So you've spent some time with the man. You kind of helped him, I guess, helped as much as you can in this journey of grief. And I don't know your process, so I don't know if there's ever a time when this process is done. But when, I guess, your time with him, maybe you don't see him, I guess, chronologically or as consistently as you do. When that time has come, what's your expectation of that man? Where should he be when your time with him has come to an end?
My expectations of them when they do leave me and things like that, to continue their lives, to continually use those tools when necessary, to reach out when they need to, because that door is always open, So it's not my expectations of them. I want them to have expectations of themselves and what they're feeling, right? So I expect them to use those tools. They expect themselves to be better, because once you go through that process, you expect yourself to be better. You want it, like, more than anything. Once you get a taste of it, once you get a taste of what it feels like to feel, to express yourself, your expectations are higher of yourself than I can ever put on.
What does it mean to feel better in these cases?
In a lot of ways, taking a breath of fresh air. No stress, no burdens, because you're releasing that during the process. So that's what it's like. It's like to feel better, like you don't have to carry everyone else's emotions with you. You can focus on you for a moment. You can be selfish in these things. Why? Because you know that it's going to benefit everyone else around you, but it has to benefit you first. And you have to be the main priority. See, I'm only there to walk with them and give these tools along the way for their tool belt. And even the ones that they don't use right there, I know that they can use them later on. So, yeah.
Okay. This is a deep conversation. It really is. I appreciate you answering the questions when it comes to the P.R.I.Z.E mantra. So what you do is, I think, the work of chosen people, and you are actually, I just get to it. You do this not alone. You do this with other people. Yes. So where can people find you? How many people are in this group, whether it's website, social media? Tell us about the nonprofit and what you do and the people around you. What kind of group is that? Give us a little insight into what that.
Okay. So I do have a team. So one of the services that I provide is that we do one of peer-to-peers with men. And so I have a team that goes out with me at night, or they go out by themselves to meet these different men, because most men do talk at night because the families are asleep and it's quiet, right? No one has to see what we're going through.
Okay.
And you can find us on the website, which is www.memoriesofus.org. And you can go to the website and see the services that we do provide, from recovery to mental health, depression and suicide, and several other things as well. And if you need a grief buddy, we do provide those. So it's like having a sponsor, but the guy's there to walk with you in your grief. A lot of other things that we do is my podcast, which is Memories of Us podcast. If you want stories of loss and grief, inspiring stories of loss and grief, we have those stories, and those stories are there to help others, because we believe those stories can be someone else's survival guide. And then my secondary podcast, which is Grief, Let's Talk About It, which is educational, and it helps to open up the doors to have these conversations around grief, diving deep into topics and things like that. They can find me on Facebook. In my Facebook group, I have 158 men. And so they may not always be in a group, but you can always, if you want to put something in there and get that support from these other men, you can also do that with a partner. I work with Grief Tribe Men as well. And so that's another organization, strong men organization as well. So we do have these different resources for these men. And if you need other resources, I am also connected with the Global Grief Network, whereas there's 112 of us grief workers. So we always have something for someone. Our goal is not to turn anyone away. We have, because everybody has different needs. Right. So my goal is to bring these resources so you don't have to go searching outside of your comfort zone. You can reach out to these individuals. And yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Yes.
I would imagine not all men feel comfortable enough at the beginning, at the onset of loss, to reach out to talk to somebody. But if you could give some advice to a man who is going through this and might be resistant in reaching out to talk to somebody, what's the advice that you would give to a man really at the start? What advice would you give to a man in that situation?
Find someone. If you don't want to go to a support group, because sometimes it's not for everyone, and be very resilient, sit down with your best friend. Sit down with you. And the reason why I say that, because your best friend has been around you for a while. They know you better than anyone else. So be around someone that you feel comfortable with. And if you don't want to go and be around someone that you're comfortable with, go and sit in one of these groups. You don't have to say anything. That's the whole purpose of it. It's not about this, that, and the other. It's about you. It is about you. So you're not alone in this. You're definitely not alone. And what you're feeling is totally normal. But you have to be around people that make it look normal. So, and that's strong right there. You have to be around people because now your language has changed. So you have to be around people that make it that it is normal. So you can kind of get a feel of what you're getting yourself into. And then over a period of time, we know that that resilience is there. But over a period of time, the beautiful thing that happens when you put men in a room by themselves like that, we talk. We talk because it's like, oh my God, I don't have to feel as if I'm being alienated. So being around people that make you feel comfortable.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you so much for that advice. Thank you so much for talking about this. This was, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was like, okay, I'm ready for how am I gonna handle this conversation? I haven't had a lot of loss in life. And I feel like when we talked before, you mentioned that because that's kind of how you got there. You didn't have a lot, and then, and it's just
Right.
But it's like we said, it's fact of life. This is something
Yes.
that happens, and being able to handle life, things that happen to us, how we handle it, and it's just our mental health. It's such a big thing. Now we're finally recognizing how important these things are, how we
Mm.
handle happiness, how we handle conflict, how we handle loss, gain, how we handle everything is so important. So the work that you do, that your team does, is so necessary and so important. So thank you for doing it,
Of course.
and it's much appreciated. So thank you for being here. And I will leave this with all the men who are listening or watching. I say this all the time, so this always fits. You are important. You are valuable. How you feel about things is warranted. It's okay to be happy or sad, to be hurt, to be whatever, but don't hold it in. Find somebody. Each and every one of us is worth hearing, is worth listening to, is worth talking to, talking about, being around. You are worth it. You always find somebody to listen to you, or you could be a listener. It's imperative. We help each other when we listen to each other. So I would leave you with that. As men, never forget that you are valuable. Somebody right now is going to be happy because you call them, because you walked in, because you said hi, because you texted them. You are an important person in this world, whether it's to me or any family member. Never forget how important you are, which is why when we lose somebody, it hurts so much. But we appreciate them when they're here, and then deal with your feelings when they're gone. You are a great person. You're a great man, and never forget you are a man and you are the prize. I'll see you next week.